Getting real with Reality Wellness, and today Nicolette, or Nicky Visser, joins us again from Reality Wellness to talk about relationships and communication. Nicky, welcome back again.
Hi there, thank you so much, and thanks for having me back. And hi to everyone else who's listening. My name's Nicky. I'm an organisational psychologist, and I suppose you're with us with Getting Real with Reality Wellness.
Yes, and today it's all about relationships and communication, both so important. You can't have one without the other, in fact. Can you tell me more about the impact of relationships on well-being?
Yeah, perfect. So the reason why I actually wanted to speak about relationships in some of our segments is because we don't realize how important our relationships are, or at least the impact they have on our well-being. And I mean, some of us might think, well, that's pretty obvious. When I have a fight with my partner, I get to the office and I'm in a terrible mood. But actually, we don't realize that long-term, it actually has bigger effects. In fact, there's studies that show that a positive relationship with your partner has led to positive mental health as well. So some examples of what those studies have found is that a positive mental health would include good self-esteem, good empathy, lower rates of anxiety, lower rates of depression, and also just improved amounts of trust. So in other words, what they're saying is that a good relationship or a stable relationship is one that can foster all of these things, where any negative or maladaptive sort of responses or maladaptive mental health issues are actually lessened, versus the self-esteem side of things are much higher. So it's really important to actually really focus on your relationships, because that is actually a big part of talking about well-being. It's about how do we interact with the people around us as part of our journey to dealing with well-being.
Well, now we know communication is important in a relationship, but what precisely is the role of communication in a relationship?
I'm a very strong advocate for communication in relationships. And the reason why is I feel that it is one of the most important pillars of a relationship. Now, there's many parts to a relationship. So I actually do a relationship workshop every quarter. And in that relationship workshop, we talk about what are the different pillars of what makes a good relationship. But one of those pillars is communication. And for me, it's the main pillar. It's the one that if you don't have that, everything else seems to fall through. And the reason why is because the role of communication in any relationship is being able to state and let a person know, or at least let your partner know, what is okay, what isn't okay, what your needs are, what your wants are, what your boundaries are, what your expectations are. And these are all really important elements of a relationship, because if you don't have a baseline for knowing what does my partner need, or what do they want, what is a do or don't, what is what is a role that they need to play in my life, what is an expectation I have of theirs, then you're going to have a very hard time in your relationship, because you're both basically going in blind into this relationship and hoping that the other person's happy, when in reality, you don't know if they are happy or not happy, because you're not communicating that effectively. With that said, communication can be complicated. It's not as simple as just saying, hey, I like when you make pasta and I expect you to make pasta for me every Friday, or something like that. It's more than that. It's about how you communicate, your tone, your dialogue. It's your verbal cues, it's your non-verbal cues, it's your communication style. And this is a certain things that not a lot of people have heard about, but a communication style is the way that you speak. It's about your love languages, which is your behavioral side of things. It's about your apology languages. So communication can be quite a vast wealth of information that can actually help give you a good idea around what are some of the things that my partner expects from me. And even if it's something that they haven't necessarily outwardly said, what am I observing? What am I taking note of? And how do we communicate effectively going forward?
Nicky, so true what you're saying, but what would you say is considered good communication?
So for me, good communication is quite easy in a sense. And I say easy, and I suppose for some people they say, yeah, no, it's easier said than done. But really, good communication can be done quite easily if there's a few sort of, how do I put this? If you've got a few concepts around what would make you feel good when you're communicating with your partner, it can be quite easy to ensure that you have good communication. And what that means is that someone who knows how to communicate with their partner, not only can they communicate what it is they need and what their boundaries are, what that actually requires, and this is what I actually wanted to speak to, is the fact that good communication has a certain prerequisite before it can actually work. Those prerequisites are basically safety. So do I feel safe in my relationship, whether it's emotionally safe, whether it's psychologically safe? It also requires tone and acknowledgement of tone and respect and trust and things like that. So those usually start as your baseline. So once you have those sort of elements in place, then the communication becomes easier, because when you feel emotionally and mentally safe or psychologically safe in your space, you can now express to your partner what it is you need from them, what it is that you expect from them, what are some boundaries you have, so things that you like or don't like that they do. Because if you're not feeling safe in the relationship, you're not going to say those things, and things are going to fester. With that said, when you have good respect in your relationship and you have a lot of trust, it means that your dialogue and your tone are also going to align to that. Now, when I talk about tone and dialogue, you can say something in a nice way. So when I say in a nice way, you can say something with a nice tone or very calm tone, but it does not necessarily mean that what you're saying is nice. And you can have it working the other way around, where you can say something quite nice, but say it in an ugly tone. And so it's really important to recognize that these two come together, but a good communication structure is one that considers those things. How am I speaking to my partner? Do they understand what my message is in the tone that I'm using, the words that I'm using to reference that and to refer back to? So it's really about how the tone and dialogue is important. Another thing that forms part of a good communication is also active listening. Now, what does active listening mean? So active listening is listening to understand and not to respond. It's where you're actually saying to yourself, you know what? I can hear exactly where my partner's coming from, and I can understand why it's such a difficult situation for them and why they're hurt by my behavior or why they're happy by my behavior. But it's actually taking the time to put yourself in their shoes and understanding where they're coming from. But also another thing for me that makes good communication is in conflict situations, it's the ability to regulate your emotions and regulate your ego. And when I talk about ego, I'm not actually referring to how we refer to it informally, like, oh, this person's got a big ego or they're egotistical. I'm talking about the psychological term of ego, meaning that it's something that tries to protect you from feeling vulnerable. That's a part of your brain that fixes that. And essentially what you need is, in a conflict situation, when your ego is high, your defense mechanisms are high. What you want to be able to do is to say, I can calm my body, I can calm my mind, and even though I feel defensive about the situation, or maybe I even feel attacked, I'm not going to let that out on my partner, but instead say, you know what, it hurts my feelings that this is the conversation we have to have, but it's an important conversation. So let me calm down and let me talk about it. So those are some things that really make for good communication. It's your ability to talk and feel safe in talking. It's your ability to speak properly to each other with a good tone, explain yourselves well, articulate well, but also be able to regulate your emotions even in a difficult conversation.
Love your explanation there on the ego, Nicky. Thank you for that. Very, very interesting. What would you say is a good formula for communicating with your partner when there's conflict?
So when it comes to conflict especially, and it's so easy for your emotions to get the better of you. And a lot of the time when someone's fighting with you or your partner's fighting with you, the first thing you say is, yeah, but you didn't do this and you didn't do that. And you should have done this, right? It's the first thing you do.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to get caught up in that. But what is a formula that I really like to use that works is, it basically goes, I feel when you, because, can you please? So essentially, I feel hurt when you come home too late, as an example, because it makes me worry about you, and because it's unfair because there's a lot of noise in the house and it wakes up the baby and can you please in the future try to come home at a reasonable time so that we can spend more time together? Can you already hear how different that sounds?
It sounds much kinder.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's much kinder, and also the focus is on how it made me feel. I'm not blaming you and I'm not attacking you for your behavior, but what I am saying is that the behavior is impacting me. And this is how it's impacting me. And it's really hard to deny a person's feelings. Look, not saying partners won't try to do that. Some might try to deny your feelings about it, but the one thing that you know is true is your emotions. And so it's a really good point of conversation because you're not attacking them. You're just saying that this is the impact, and can we look at some other ways to work together to fix this? So it's a really nice one. I explain it a lot in my workshop, but what was really funny is that the one day my husband came home and he used it, because he never used to use it in the past. And then one day he came home and he used it, and I was so baffled and confused when he said it that I was also impressed. I was like, oh, yeah. Okay, like I can't even feel mad. I'm not even angry.
Too impressed to be angry.
Yeah, I was. And honestly, it does take you a little bit off track, like, in the beginning, but it's actually such a nice way because you don't feel attacked. You feel so much better hearing how that person feels because it's also an open conversation and you may know that they're being vulnerable with you.
Exactly. I don't know if you've seen the movie This Is 40, but when they went for marriage counseling, their counselor gave them a similar method of communicating with each other, but obviously it didn't work for them. I don't know, have you seen the movie?
I think I have, but it would have been a very long time ago. Yeah, I used to watch a lot of those movies.
Hilarious. No, it's hilarious. You'll see how it works out for them. I don't think that really worked. They just modified it and made it their own. Oh my word, that was very funny. But finally, Nicky, what are some tips for communicating with your partner during conflict?
So conflict is going to happen. That's an unfortunate reality with all relationships. Is you're with a person long enough, they're going to start to annoy you. And so it's really important to know how to constructively have conflict. And I say constructively have conflict because there's no way to avoid it. But what you can do is look at the conflict from a different point of view. Now, a lot of the time, whenever we get into conflict, the first thing we say to each other is, you did this, I did that, you shouldn't have done X, Y, and Z, right? But also what that's actually doing is you're putting yourself in a position where you're saying it's me versus you. But in reality, it's not about me versus you. We're on the same team. We're working together. We've made a commitment to be on the same team. So why are we fighting each other? Instead, we should be focusing on what is a way to solve the problem. So it's actually us versus the problem as opposed to me versus you. And so your language very much has to align to that. So it's as much as this is something that is frustrating, but what are we going to do about it? Where do we go from here? How do we move forward? And so with that said, in any kind of conflict, you need to focus your mindset on how do we solve the problem rather than try to win this argument, because it's very easy to want to win. With that said, some advice that I received a few years back that I really loved is in any conflict, at no point should your partner not feel loved. So even in an argument, even in a fight, and it doesn't matter how heated it gets, your partner always needs to feel that they are still loved by you, and that you still love them.
Yeah.
And I really love that advice because it's so easy to make a person feel that, okay, but do you still love me after this argument? But it's even harder to kind of recognize how you're treating your partner in a conflict situation and making sure that they still feel at ease even in the conversation. Some other things that I'd recommend for conflict, and these are the final 2 points that I want to make is that are quite important, is you both need to know almost like your argument style. That's not a thing, but the idea is that we all have different ways we want to argue. And the thing is, some of us need time to cool down. So some of us don't want to argue straight away. We might say, okay, tell me what your problem is. Give me some time to cool down. Let me think about it and we can come back to it. Other people are like, no, I need to deal with it now. So recognize what is needed in that moment in time. Give yourselves time to cool down. Take a break. Change the environment if you're seeing it's getting too heated. So know when to stop and know when to self-correct and know when to give each other space and then when to come back to the conversation when you do come back. And then lastly, the final thing for me is know your triggers. Know what triggers your partner and what triggers you. There are certain conversations that will be the same argument for the next 20, 30 years. Unfortunately, there will be some of those themes. But if it's a trigger point for you and it's something you can't talk about, you guys need to have a way to sort of talk about it in a way that's sensitive to how that person's going to respond, but also mentally prepares them. So for me, I really like using a code word. If I know it's something that's going to affect my partner or it's a trigger for them, I'm going to say, listen, guys, or listen, whoever, I'm going to talk to you about something that's going to trigger you. Or let's say my word is duck or pineapple or apple or something. Then they'll know. Maybe it's a code red conversation. So whatever your code word is going to be, that's what it's going to be. A code word that South Africans use with everyone when they know they're going to tell you something that's going to be sensitive is, can I be honest with you?
Oh, yeah.
You don't realize, but that's a code word.
Yeah, I hear that quite often. Can I be honest with you? Yes, very
And that's
often.
a South African thing, because I actually realized I had a client from overseas who was in a workshop, basically said, I don't understand when South Africans do this thing where they say, can I be honest with you? Have you not been honest? And I was like, no, that's actually our code word for saying that I've been tiptoeing around this topic because I know it's sensitive, but now I need to come in head on. Are you mentally ready for this?
Wow, I didn't even realize that it's a South African thing. That's so amazing. Wow.
Yeah, so you can already see how important that is because already you know what that means for you. So imagine that in a relationship where you have a code word that explains it. Like for me, my husband and I, we have a code word where, I just basically say we need to reset. So in other words, walk away from the conversation, cool down, come back. And that's how we know that means that we both need to calm down.
Yeah, wow. You've really shared some insightful information here today, Nicky. Thank you so much for your input and your time. We really appreciate it. Can you tell us how do we connect with Reality Wellness?
Yeah, so Reality Wellness has a website, which is www.realitywellness.co.za. There you can look at our articles. We've also got a podcast on Spotify called A Little Bit of Reality. So you can also engage on us on there. And then, if on the website, all our contact details are there. So if you want to get hold of us, if you would like more information on our services, you're more than welcome to go there.
Nicky, thank you so much. Until next time.
Perfect. Thank you so much.